This may sound strange, but one of my favorite aspects of writing is doing the research. When crafting a story and getting in the heads of my characters, I get to learn a multitude of interesting things. It's like I'm living vicariously through my characters to experience a world totally separate and unique from mine. When possible, I try to travel to the locations where my books will be set so that I can write intelligently about the characters and do the setting justice. One of my upcoming books in my Honeysuckle Island series will be set in Italy. It was an adventure to go there and immerse myself in the culture and beauty. Traveling to Italy was a dream come true. It has always been at the top of the list of places I wanted to visit. I invite you to journey with me to Italy, but not just as a tourist. I want you to view it through my lens, through the eyes of a writer. To do this, you'll need to know a little about the book and series. The title of my book is A Sliver of Doubt. It's up for pre-order on Amazon now and will be released early next fall. As you can tell from the title, the book will have suspense. Also, it'll contain lots of swoony romance. My main character is Charlotte, or Charlie. She's an anthropology student at Harvard. Charlie has a twin brother named Forge. I'm writing his story now. Forge is a bit of a rebel who has a penchant for doing dangerous stunts. Charlie, on the other hand, is quiet and unassuming. Tall and thin with long, silky dark hair, Charlie has a big heart and is a philanthropist to the core. Her goal is to use her prominent family name and resources to help make the world a better place. You may have noticed that the series is called Honeysuckle Island. Charlie is from this fictional island in North Carolina, which was inspired by Baldhead Island. The idea for Honeysuckle Island came about because of a vacation my husband and I took to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with some friends. We were looking for interesting places to explore. My husband found Baldhead Island, and the rest is history. In this case, I went to Italy with the intent to do research for A Sliver of Doubt. While I was there, I would often ask myself, how would Charlie feel about this? How would an anthropologist view the majesty of Rome or the ruins of Pompeii? Let's start at the beginning. After 16 long hours of flying coach, we landed in Rome and then took a train and then the metro to our Airbnb destination in Rome. As luck would have it, Italy was experiencing record-breaking temperatures.
Europe is sweltering under one of its earliest and hottest heat waves on record.
Needless to say, it was muggy and hot. Charlie is from Honeysuckle Island. She would be fairly tolerant to heat and humidity. However, she's a student at Harvard and spends much of her time indoors where it is air-conditioned. Like me, Charlie would be hot and sweaty. It was daunting at first to take public transportation. However, trains, metros, and buses would become our way of life for the next 15 days. Let me back up a minute and tell a little about the members of our party. There were 5 of us who went. Me, my husband Patrick, my son Austin, daughter-in-law Jana Lee, and my nephew Grant. It was great to have Grant with us. He lived in Italy for 2 years and speaks fluent Italian. Also, he knew his way around Rome and Naples. Back then when we first arrived in Italy, we were met at our Airbnb by the son of the host. He was super helpful and spoke good English. We struck up an instant friendship. He showed us around the apartment, which was nice and comfortable. The best part was that the bedrooms were air-conditioned. We went out that evening to explore and found a quaint restaurant a stone's throw away. This was my first experience eating Italian pizza. One bite and I was hooked. Charlie will most definitely be a fan of margherita pizza. I'll talk more about this shortly, but first let me tell you about the language. I asked Grant to teach me a few phrases in Italian so that I could at least order at restaurants. I was quite proud of myself and asked the waiter what I thought was fairly decent Italian. However, he chuckled and commenced to take my order in near-perfect English. I learned right away that many people in Rome speak English. It was a pleasant surprise. After dinner, we looked in the windows of a few shops. All the while, Patrick had to peel my face away from the window. I was going berserk over the stylish shoes. I can never get enough shoes, high heels in particular. I saw the most adorable pair of red heels. Red happens to be my favorite color. Alas, the shop was closed and we never did get back that way. I still regret not buying those heels. Before retiring to our Airbnb, we stopped in for some gelato. It was incredible. Charlie is definitely going to be a fan of lemon gelato. From that time forward, every time I got gelato, I would have to try the lemon. It was tangy, not too sweet, and not too creamy. It tasted more like sorbet. Incidentally, when we got back home, I went to a shop and ordered lemon gelato. Ooh, big disappointment. Not even remotely the same. It was way too sweet and tasted more like cream. By the time we got back to the Airbnb, we crashed. The jet lag was brutal. We had lost an entire night's sleep. I spent the first part of the next morning trying to figure out how to use the blow dryer that came with the Airbnb and my flat iron. Lucky for Charlie, she has long straight hair which she will most likely wear up due to the heat. Yes, I'm going to make the weather hot when Charlie goes to Italy. You know how in Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, the heat becomes its own character? That's how it was with us. It gripped us in a tight, sweaty fist the entire time. I'm going to carry that over into Charlie's story. Back to my hair and the Airbnb. I bought an adapter, but as it turns out, I needed yet another adapter to connect my adapter to the wall plug-in. For a while there, I thought I might have to forgo fixing my hair. However, someone, I believe it was Grant, mentioned having seen an adapter connected to the microwave. I was able to use that. Our Airbnb host was kind enough to provide a few things for breakfast. They have these neatly packaged items that are a little lighter and flakier than Melba toast. I wish we could get something similar to that in the US. They taste great with jam. When planning our trip to Italy, we decided that we didn't want to rent a car but would take public transportation instead. My husband Patrick was adamant about us experiencing Italy not as tourists, but as the locals do. Also, he wanted to avoid the hassle of a car rental and driving on unfamiliar roads. I have to add in this tidbit because we walked all over the place. On average, we walked 8 to 10 miles a day in the sweltering heat. It was certainly an experience. I was blown away by the beauty and charm of Rome. The cradle of Western civilization and Christian culture, Rome is referred to as the City of Seven Hills or the Eternal City. An interesting side note, my husband and I used to live in Rome, Georgia, which is a sister city of Rome due to its 7 hills. My parents used to live in Florence, Alabama. So, on a given day of visiting my parents, we would leave Rome, go through Athens, Alabama, and then on to Florence. You may remember the legend of Romulus and Remus. They were twins who were nursed by a she-wolf. They built a city but then got into a dispute where Remus was killed. Romulus then named the city after himself. We started out our trip by going to Vatican City. The Vatican is the world's smallest nation and the only country located entirely within another city. St. Peter's Basilica was impressive. It took over 100 years to build. It's the largest church in the world as far as interior measurement. It's considered to be one of the holiest of Catholic shrines. The stone pillar in the center of the piazza is the one that stood in the Circus of Nero where Peter was martyred. It's now treasured as a witness of his death. From there, we went to a nearby street market where vendors were selling their art and wares. I felt like I was in a movie when walking down the street market in Rome. The trees were big and leafy, and there was a breathtaking view of the river. We saw lots of art about Roman holiday with Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck. When we turned onto a street with the houses close together, I was smitten by the beauty. I marveled at the charm of the cobblestone streets, the wooden shutters on the home that were nestled close together, and the vines climbing up the walls. We found a cozy pizzeria on one of the picturesque streets and had lunch there. There were even red and white checked tablecloths on the table. Can you guess what I ordered? Margarita pizza and a salad. Frizzante was a word that I fast learned. It means sparkling water. The frizzante was great. We ordered it everywhere we went. Next, we ventured over to the iconic Colosseum by way of the Roman Forum, which was at one time the religious, economic, and political center of Rome. As we passed the ruins, I thought of Charlie and how she would be fascinated with the culture of ancient Rome. Grant, our nephew, related how the Colosseum was built using stones and marble from the basilicas or churches that had been torn down. We visited a nearby park so that we could admire the Colosseum from a bird's eye view. The Colosseum could hold approximately 50 to 80,000 spectators. I can't look at the Colosseum without thinking about the violent history of the gladiators and the executions. The Colosseum is the largest amphitheater ever built. We opted to admire the Pantheon, a former temple, from the outside instead of waiting in the long lines to get inside. It's one of the best preserved of the ancient buildings in Rome because it has been in continuous use throughout history. Trevi Fountain. Oh my goodness, I was blown away by the beauty and grandeur of the Trevi Fountain. I knew that the Trevi Fountain would be impressive, but I wasn't expecting something so grand. Wow, it is a sight to behold. Do I dare say that it reminded me a little of Caesar's Palace in Vegas? I guess I now know where the inspiration from the casino came from. The Trevi Fountain was super crowded though. I later learned that the Trevi Fountain is a high pickpocket area. It makes sense, as people are crammed so close together. The fountain was in Roman holiday. I'm going to have to watch the movie again to see it. While I'm on the topic of pickpocketers, let me just say that we went to great lengths before our trip to ensure that our passports, cash, and credit cards would be safe. We purchased belts that we wore underneath our clothes. My belt stuck out a little, making me look like I had a pooch or a flat tire. I cringe a little when I see the pictures. I invested in a travel purse. It was nifty the way the zippers latched, making it difficult to open. Also, the strap was slash resistant. When we were at train stations and metro stations, announcements would routinely come over the loudspeakers, warning people to be aware of potential pickpocketers. One bonus of Rome that I hadn't anticipated was all of the fountains or water filling stations in Rome. The water was cool and delicious, and it was free. All you had to do was go up to a station and refill your water bottle. Water ran from the fountains continuously. It must have been some sort of filtration system. I highly recommend bringing your own water bottle that you can refill. I used a carabiner to attach the bottle to the ring of my travel purse. Remember how I said that I love heels? I practically live in them. I started out wearing sandals with low heels, thinking that I could walk in them forever. I lasted 2 hours. After several blisters, I had to change into my tennis shoes, which I wore for the duration of the trip. I had broken my pinky toe a month before we left for the trip. It was one of those silly accidents. I was making my bed and hit it on a chest. It was super painful, but I assumed it was fine. 20 or so minutes later, I tried to put on my tennis shoes to go for a run and realized how truly injured my toe was. Anyway, fast forward to the trip. I thought my toe was healed, but it started giving me fits from all the walking. My daughter-in-law, Janelle, saved the day. She Googled how to tape up a broken pinky toe. She taped it up and I could manage after that. I had brought several outfits thinking that they would be cool enough to wear. However, it was so stinking hot that I ended up wearing the same 2 outfits over and over. I'd have to go back to the Airbnb each night and wash my clothes for the next day. One thing about Rome that struck me was how every place we looked was picturesque. The Spanish Steps were no exception. There are 135 steps and 3 different terraces that have reference to the Holy Trinity. The view from the top is exquisite. I'm used to seeing cities that have a historic section, but this was much faster. Everywhere we looked was incredible. Some streets were so perfect that I could almost believe I was seeing a movie set or something at Disney World. We saw several street performers on the trip. Some were better than others. One was incredible. I felt like we were listening to someone the caliber of Nathan Pacheco. People often talk about globalization. I remember having a conversation with a dear friend where she remarked that she was glad she got to backpack through Europe before all of the American influence came into play. We saw McDonald's, Burger King, Five Guys, and Subway. I was surprised at the number of restaurants that served hamburgers, and they were more expensive than the Italian food. We could get a big margarita pizza for 5 or 6 euros, whereas a burger and fries were 10 to 12 euros. Needless to say, we didn't have a single burger during our entire trip. The food was the highlight of the trip. Grant, our nephew, made us some outstanding carbonara. The first thing we would do when traveling to a new town was to go to the market. We enjoyed this experience because it made us feel like locals. Once I even conversed with a store clerk in Italian about the cost of peaches. I was quite proud of myself. Of course, it helped that I was doing charades, pointing at the peaches and then at the price. Next, we took a high-speed train south to Napoli. The long-distance trains are very nice and comfortable. It was fun to look out and see the countryside as we traveled. Because we were traveling from city to city, Patrick was adamant about me not carrying lots of luggage. Historically, I'm not a light traveler. I like having my clothes and shoes. However, for this trip, I stuffed everything into a backpack, including my computer, which I knew I would need for research. The backpack weighed 30 pounds. It was so heavy on my shoulders. Patrick, being the gentleman that he is, carried his backpack on his back and mine on his chest. He claimed that having my backpack on his chest helped to balance out the weight. However, I knew that he was doing it to help me out. I'm so grateful that he did. With my injured toe and the heat, the added weight of the backpack would have been brutal. After getting off the high-speed train in Napoli, the third largest city in Italy after Rome and Milan, we took the metro to our destination. We then walked another mile or so to our Airbnb. I loved the charm of our Airbnb. It was located off one of the cobblestone streets in the center of town. We stopped at two massive wooden doors with a smaller cutout. The cutout was for people to walk through, and the larger doors were for cars. As we went through the cutout, I felt like I was in a Harry Potter movie. We walked into a courtyard where we called our host, who met us. The apartment was on the 5th floor. There was a tiny elevator that would only fit 2 people. It looked like a cage. I rode up the elevator with our host, an elderly gentleman who spoke little English. The apartment was impressive with the balconies that overlooked the city. As with our first Airbnb, only the bedrooms were air-conditioned. The kitchen was tiny and stifling hot. Consequently, we opted not to cook while we were in Naples, so we wouldn't heat up the apartment. A funny little tidbit. The air conditioning units build up condensation. Our host was adamant about us making sure to empty the bucket daily so the tenants below wouldn't get drenched. After getting settled in and resting for a short period of time, we ventured out for what Napoli is famous for, the food. Napoli has earned more Michelin stars than any other place in Italy. We wound our way through a conglomerate of narrow cobblestone streets as we dodged cars. With the cobblestone streets and the clothesline stretched across the tight clustered streets, I felt like I was peeking into the set of West Side Story. Grant led us to a restaurant that served the best pizza I've ever eaten. I still dream about that margarita pizza. The following day, we took a train to Pompeii, the ancient city buried under volcanic ash during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79. When I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I wrote a narrative essay about Pompeii. It was set on the eve of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. I was in the marketplace and heard a stranger with a strange accent and brisk manner of speech, talking about how the volcano could erupt. The stranger warned people to flee. I listened to him and survived. I ended the essay with, "I owe my life to the brisk-talking stranger with the funny accent." It was surreal to be in Pompeii after hearing about it all of my life. We looked out to see the blue-gray outline of Mount Vesuvius in the distance, resting its shoulders in a docile and peaceful slumber. It seemed hard to believe that Mount Vesuvius once covered Pompeii in a fiery blaze of fury. Pompeii was much larger than I expected. A wealthy town, the population was approximately 11,000. I was amazed at how much of the city remains intact. You can still see the details of the frescoes on the walls of what were once lavish dwellings. I didn't realize that Pompeii was such a sensual place with the brothels and other various forms of artwork that were displayed in the homes and other areas. King Francis visited the Pompeii exhibition with his wife and daughter. He was so appalled by the erotic art that he had it locked away in a secret cabinet within the museum. When we first arrived, I glanced over and saw an art exhibit. I was about to go inside when my daughter-in-law stopped me. She pointed to a sign that read "The Sensuality of Pompeii" and suggested that my readers of clean and inspirational romance might not be interested in seeing the video or photos of that exhibit. One of the most sobering aspects of Pompeii was seeing the bodies of the victims that were killed almost instantly by the ash and noxious gases that engulfed the city on the second day of the eruption. Many were trying to protect their faces, and one mother was trying to protect her child. Despite the heat of the day, I found these molds chilling, a stark reminder of the suffering and devastation that comes with a natural disaster. After leaving Pompeii, we ate lunch at an open-air cafe on the main street of town. We then toured a basilica. The carvings on the walls were exquisite, and it was nice to stand in front of the large fans to cool off. The following day, we took a train to the Amalfi Coast. Once there, we boarded a ferry. It's hard to put into words the incredible beauty of the Amalfi Coast. From a distance, Positano will literally take your breath away with its colorful buildings slotted into the hillside. The ferry took us to Amalfi. However, Positano was so incredibly beautiful that we opted to stay on the ferry and go back to that location first. We would then take a bus from there to Amalfi to catch the ferry back. When we arrived at Positano, we got off the ferry and immediately climbed what seemed to be an endless number of stairs in search of a restroom. It was so hot and humid that we were drenched. The view from the steps was incredible. We got nearly to the top and learned to our dismay that the restrooms were at the bottom of the stairs. So we went back down the stairs, used the restroom, and then climbed back up. An interesting thing about the restrooms, they cost €1. The problem we ran into was that most people would give other denominations of change, and the machines would only take €1 coins. It was super frustrating. After hiking back up the stairs, we made our way up the winding, narrow roads, past the hotels and restaurants to get to the bus stop. We got on what would be our craziest bus ride ever. The roads are so narrow that the buses actually scrape up against one another. You're on this crowded, hot bus, and you're looking out over the side of the cliff to the ocean below. All you can think is, I hope the driver knows what he's doing, otherwise we're going over the edge. Our driver was nice to the passengers and a capable driver, but he had no problem bawling out the other bus drivers when they came too close to his bus. As we twisted and turned along the road, I was super grateful that I don't get car sick. Positano looked exactly like the vision that I have in my head of Italy, with the colorful houses stacked on the side of the mountain. I'm going to set part of Charlie's story in Positano. Amalfi was equally beautiful with the rows of colorful umbrellas lining the beach. It looked like something out of a picture or movie. After leaving Napoli, we went north to the Tuscany region. Our first stop was Florence. Let me pause here by saying that we had our first hiccup in Florence. When we planned our Italy trip, we knew we were going at the hottest time of the year. However, we wanted our son Austin and daughter-in-law Janalee to go with us. Since Janalee is a school teacher, the only time she has off is during the summer. Patrick and I grew up in the South. We figured we could handle the heat. Before our trip, Patrick spent a month planning every detail. He searched out the places we wanted to visit and then found Airbnbs that had lots of good recent reviews. As we were on the train headed to Florence, Patrick quietly told me, I just realized that the 2 Airbnbs that we booked in Tuscany don't have air conditioning. My heart dropped. Up to this point, we would brave the heat of the day with the knowledge that we could eventually go back to our Airbnb and relax where it was nice and cool. Maybe Tuscany will be cooler than Napoli, I suggested. With a grimace, Patrick responded, it's supposed to be hotter. We booked a place in sleepy Sesto Fiorentino, a village north of Florence. We wanted a hub situated in a central location so that we could visit Florence and the surrounding areas. The one condition was that our place had to be within a reasonable walking distance to the metro. We had a hard time finding a good place that would fit all of those qualifications. Finally, we had to settle on something. At the time, Patrick and I didn't even think to check to see if it had air conditioning. The place had 2 fans which were covered in dust. They didn't move any air whatsoever. Finally, we resorted to taking them apart and cleaning them so that they would function better. I slept with an ice pack the 2 nights we were there. While we enjoyed seeing Florence, the heat made for a miserable experience. On a positive note, while in Florence, we visited the Piazza del Duomo, located in the heart of the city, which, by the way, is called Firenze in Italian. At first, we were confused as to why we couldn't find Florence on any of our maps, and then Grant pointed out the variation in the Italian spelling. Napoli is the same. It's known by Naples to us, but Napoli in Italy. While at the Piazza, we went to Giotto's bell tower. The highlight was climbing up to the top. It was a majestic sight to look out and see the collection of terracotta rooftops, hugged by the gently sloping blue-gray mountains in the distance. It was at the bell tower where it hit me that I was experiencing a part of history that was as old as time itself. Janalee and I took the opportunity to rest and cool off part of the way up. After I got my second wind, I climbed the rest of the way to the top. The passageway is narrow and winding. It wouldn't be good for someone who is claustrophobic. Lucky for me, I wasn't bothered by the tight space. I just took my time so that I wouldn't trip and fall. When people came up behind me, I just let them pass. The view at the top made the effort worthwhile. The wind felt so good on my hot cheeks. From there, we went to the Dome and then the Museo dell'Opera. The museum was air-conditioned, giving us a chance to cool off. There were so many impressive sculptures here, but the one thing that stood out to me was the reliquary containing John the Baptist's jawbone. There were several other buildings included in the tour package we purchased. Sadly, we didn't realize that most of them closed at 4 p.m., so we only got to visit the ones I mentioned. It was interesting to see the art that was on the ground. Every so often, we would see the same 6 or 7 posters arranged on the asphalt. Austin and Janalee explained that it was a scam. Hope that people will step on them and will then say that they have to pay for the poster. We were very careful not to step on any of them. We saw several of these types of scams on our trip. Once, a man tried to offer me a rose in Rome. The normal reaction is to take something that a person hands you. I didn't, however. I politely told him no and continued walking. Another common scam was for someone to approach and give you a high five. If you do so, they slip a bracelet on your wrist and try to get you to pay for it. A man approached my son and daughter-in-law. He shook Austin's hand and slipped a bracelet on it. Then he proceeded to tell Austin about his child that had been born several days earlier. The man then asked Austin to give him money to help his child in exchange for the bracelet. Austin told him that he couldn't give him money, but that he would give the bracelet back. The man got frustrated, but he played it cool and was polite before moving on to his next target. Early one Saturday morning, all 5 of us were loaded down with our backpacks and walking across a parking lot to go to the bus where we would go to our next location. 2 guys and a girl in their early 20s called out to us in English. Having grown jaded by the scams by this time, we ignored them and just kept walking. They kept pace behind us as we walked. Speaking English the entire time, one of them said to the other, "Those people don't even speak English." We felt sure the group was trying to pull over some scam and figured our best course of action was just to keep walking fast and ignore them. Eventually, when we came to other groups of people, they went their separate way. Remember how I said that we booked an Airbnb centrally located to places we wanted to visit in Tuscany? We went back to Florence a second time to see Michelangelo's statue of David. The 17-foot marble statue is a marvel. It's hard for the mind to conceive how Michelangelo could have sculpted this detailed, very large, and lifelike sculpture with limited technology and tools in the early 1500s. The gem of the trip was a quaint town called Lucca. We loved the peaceful, steady vibe of Lucca. There were lots of quaint shops and restaurants. Our Airbnb didn't have air here either. As in Napoli, it was located off a cobblestone street in the heart of Lucca, beside a restaurant. A wall encircles the perimeter of the historic section of Lucca. Very few cars are allowed inside the wall. People either bike or walk. Eva, our housekeeper and concierge, was a lively, jovial woman who fanned herself vigorously while complaining about the heat. She explained that she'd stayed out late the night before at a concert, so the heat was getting to her more than it normally would. She showed us around the 2-story apartment, apologizing for the heat. She explained that the owners of the apartment, who lived in New York, attempted to have air conditioning installed a few days earlier, but that the man who was going to install it was in the hospital. I felt sorry for the poor man and for us. At least this time, the fans worked well. Eva spoke in choppy English until she learned that Grant spoke Italian. She chided him for not telling her sooner. From then on, the Italian words rolled off her tongue at a rapid-fire pace. We made an unusual friend in Luca, Matisse, a Garfield-sized gray and white cat. Eva warned us that Matisse would climb up onto the roof and enter the apartment if we left certain windows open. She said, "If he gets in, I scoop him up and boop, put him back out." Sure enough, a few nights later, I awoke to the sound of an irritated meow. I went into the hallway and found Matisse. Half asleep, I spoke a few calming words to him in my syrupy cat voice and then, boop, scooped him up and placed him outside. As I closed the windows, he pressed his nose to the glass, staring back at me. Let's just say that Matisse will definitely make an appearance in Charlie's story. While in Lucca, we climbed to the top of the bell tower and looked off. In the evenings, we enjoyed walking along the wall that surrounds the town. Every day, we got gelato at least twice. We found a little shop near our apartment and kept going there. Of course, I got lemon every time. I would often get 2 scoops so that I could try other flavors. The dark chocolate was rich, but oh so good. We ventured out to Cinque Terre for a day trip. Cinque Terre is a collection of centuries-old seaside villages that dot the coastline of the Italian Riviera. I was looking forward to going here most of all. I had seen incredibly beautiful pictures of a harbor with colorful fishing boats on social media that an acquaintance of mine had posted a month before we went to Italy. Cinque Terre was beautiful, but I have to say it wasn't as spectacular as the Amalfi Coast. We took a bus from Lucca to La Spezia. From there, we boarded a train that took us to Cinque Terre. We went on a Friday, and it was super crowded, just as Eva warned it would be. The train runs through all 5 villages. You hop on and off as often as you'd like. If I go there again during a more moderate time of the year, it would be fun to hike from village to village. The views of the ocean are spectacular. On our way back to Lucca, we saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa from the train. It's a lot smaller than I thought it would be. On the last leg of the trip, we stayed in Rome. We were overjoyed that our apartment had air conditioning in all of the bedrooms. We got there and crashed for several hours before venturing out for one last trip to Vatican City before heading to the airport to return home the following day. Generally, we felt safe the entire time we were in Italy. People were kind and friendly. The food was incredible, some of the best I've ever had. The only time I felt vulnerable was when we were at the airport returning home. We stood in a cattle line for what seemed like hours after first arriving at the airport. We finally got up to the ticket agent, who informed us in halting English that her screen was showing that we owed money for our tickets. We explained that we'd purchased round-trip tickets through Delta, and so no money was owed. She went back and forth in Italian with the 2 ticket agents on either side of her. At one point of the conversation, she must have realized that some of us could understand a little Italian. My husband speaks Spanish, so he caught about 80% of the conversation. Of course, Grant understood the whole thing. Grant had been standing back and quietly listening the entire time. We told the woman that one of us spoke Italian. Grant stepped forward and spoke to her in Italian. A few minutes later, the ticket agent was able to work out our tickets. I'm not sure what would have happened to us if Grant hadn't spoken Italian. Going through security, I removed the belt that held my passport, wallet, and cash. I wasn't sure how it would fare going through the metal detector. I went through without setting anything off. However, an airport security agent stopped me as I went through and spoke to me in Italian. With all the people speaking English, it was interesting how most of the people at the airport only spoke Italian. The man pulled me aside and swabbed my hands. He then placed the swab in a machine. I've had this done in the U.S. Normally, it only takes a few seconds. I looked at the machine. Everything seemed okay to me, so I proceeded to walk forward. He told me to stop in English and corralled me to another nearby station. Meanwhile, my backpack, computer, travel bag, and passport are floating away on the conveyor belt. All I'm wearing is jeans, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes. Patrick grabbed our stuff and waited for me a few paces away. The agent and another woman talked back and forth in Italian for what seemed like forever. In reality, it was about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I'm panicking. All sorts of scenarios are running through my head. I don't speak Italian. I have no idea why they're detaining me. I'm completely at their mercy, and I don't know what it is about me that they find so suspicious. As I'm waiting for them to let me go, I watch 2 or 3 people go through the metal detector and light it up for one reason or another. They dart back and remove various metal items and then go through without incident. Finally, I'm allowed to leave. By this time, I am shaking like a leaf. Needing to use the restroom, Grant had gone on ahead of us after we got our tickets, so I didn't have him to interpret. We got to our gate and had an hour to spare. We had left our Airbnb at 5:40 in the morning, had walked 2 or so miles to the metro, and then we took a high-speed train to the airport. We were famished, so we got something to eat. When it was time to board our flight, the agent scanned our tickets and passports. Austin and Janalee went through first, then me, followed by Patrick. Grant was off shopping to spend the rest of his euros before boarding the plane. We assumed that he would board sometime after us. After my documents were scanned, I walked past the ticket agents and was going down the walkway to the plane when I was stopped again by security agents. This time, they swabbed my travel bag. After a couple of minutes, they let me pass. Unbeknownst to me, Patrick had been detained by a ticket agent who told him that his ticket was no good. She took him over to the counter, typed in several keys, and printed him a different one. Eventually, we both got on the plane. Grant boarded several minutes afterwards. I still have no idea why I was detained, not once, but twice. Needless to say, when that plane finally took off, we were grateful to be going home. Getting into Italy was a piece of cake. Getting out was trickier. When crafting stories, I try to get in the heads of my characters. I felt super vulnerable and helpless in the airport when I was being detained. I'm going to draw on those feelings when writing Charlie's story. It will heighten the suspense to infuse real-life experience in with the story. I imagine that when Charlie finally makes it back home, she'll want to kiss American soil. Our trip to Italy was one for the books, an experience of a lifetime. It was neat to bridge my expectations from what I've seen on TV and movies with real-life experience. I'm excited to write Charlie's story as I fit pieces in from our trip. I came away with a new appreciation for my car, air conditioning, and for the many conveniences that we have in the U.S. I miss the incredible architecture of Italy, the richness of the culture, and the food. I learned a few things about myself. I can live out of a backpack for 15 days. I can spend 15 days wearing tennis shoes even though I don't like it. Public transportation is sort of groovy. I like the convenience of it. Rome is amazing. I could go back there and spend a month. Lastly, my nephew taught me how to make a delicious carbonara. One great health benefit came out of my trip. I decided that since we'd spent 15 days walking 8 to 10 miles, that I should just continue the tradition. I've been out walking 6 or 7 days a week since I've been home, and I regularly get on the elliptical machine. It feels good to be on a good exercise routine again. I sometimes get too sedentary with my writing. I can't wait for you to read A Sliver of Doubt. I suppose I'll have to write the book first. I'd better roll up my sleeves and get to work. Charlie's story is sitting on my shoulder and begging to be told.